I'm here with Blackwald of Twilight Force to talk about At the Heart of Wintervale, out January 20th on Nuclear Blast. It's been a long time since we spoke. I know we talked about when Dawn of the Dragonstar came out, and how have you been since?
Yes, it has been a very long time. I've been great. It's been a lot of work ever since. I mean, Dawn of Dragonstar came out and we couldn't really do much, like the pandemic hit and we couldn't tour or anything. So what we did, we wrote an album instead. So here we are today, a week from release. So we basically started this album in 2019, I guess.
Wow, wow. So it's
Yeah.
been a long time coming. So let me ask you this. From a fan point of view, what kind of epic tales and adventures can we expect? I mean, I know what we can expect because I've heard the album, but for those that haven't, what can fans expect from this new record?
I would say that it is a kind of a natural progression from what we made last time. Uh I feel like it's a bit of a roller coaster because the songs are quite different from one another, which I hope people will appreciate because it's a little bit, maybe a little bit more varied than Dawn of the Dragonstar, if you will. And so we have like some of those classic power metal tracks, but we also have uh, some of the tracks that are more like the orchestral epics, so to speak. And so I think we like made a good balance between new and old. I wouldn't say like old. It all sounds. It's a coherent sound, but a little bit more varied and focused, maybe sound wise. I think. So it's more is more. So we've been just uh, more the same, but hopefully a little more ennobled and a little more
And, and,
focused.
and, and from a concept, from a storyline point of view, where is this album going to take the fan?
Well, this takes place as have our previous albums. It takes place in the Twilight Kingdoms, the fantasy world that Twilight Force exists in within. So all the songs are derived from that world, and I think on this album it will be even more clear to people than it has been in the past. So hopefully, I mean, I know that a lot of people will just stream it, but if you actually have the booklet and you sit down and you listen and you read the lyrics, we have spent quite a lot of time trying to make sure that the lyrics are a little bit more intelligible and maybe clear in terms of storytelling. So there is a very clear beginning, middle, and end to all the songs, and a very pretty clear storyline that you can follow. And some of them are pretty in depth, and I hope that it's easy when you can think that when you write power metal lyrics, let's just throw the classic rhymes at the wall, light night might fight, and call it a day. But we have really tried to not do that and really spent a lot of effort, time and effort to make it a little more interesting to read and not just do. I think in the past, all of our songs in the past have also had clear stories, but they have maybe been a little more like littered with metaphors and things that might not be super clear at unless you read between the lines. But I don't think there is that much in between the line reading that's needed this time around. So I hope people will appreciate that.
I never realized that those words that you mentioned would be like the four commandments or the five commandments of power metal, but you're absolutely right.
A light night might fight.
Yes.
That's yep. They have been used.
You mentioned some of the changes on this record when it compares to its predecessors, and you also mentioned that being an aspect of your growth. Now, from that growth, where do you see the creative process? Has the creative process impacted that growth, or has the growth impacted the creative process?
I think our creative process is more or less the same, except maybe a little more fluent and efficient, without been like negatively impacted by, oh, I am now older and therefore wiser. So you just are a little bit more, you have a clearer goal in mind and a clearer image of what it is that you want to create. When I start writing a song, I can pretty easily tell where it's going, and if I have a vision, I know a little faster how to get there. So that's just the part of based off of experience and a lot of trial and error throughout the years. Like I've always been happy with all the albums that we've done. I just feel like this time around it was a little easier to get where I wanted with things, and so the creative process, however, is the same. I would say it's just um, I write the same way, and there's no shortage of ideas or or creativity. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that
Yeah,
was
no, you did, you did.
yeah.
And on as I segue from that, I have to ask you about the overall design of the album, because you mentioned some. Uh, I'm going to use the word chaos. There's a little bit of chaos on this record, like you said. There's songs are very different from one another. There's a lot of different attributes. I would say that you can definitely almost break this album into three different acts in terms of what the experience is in the beginning, what the experience is in the middle, and then what the experience is going to be at the end. Was it difficult for you to bring these diverse songs, for lack of a better word, in a way that makes the listening experience somewhat concise?
It is. That's a an astute observation. I think it was not terribly difficult. It was more like uh, just a natural, I think, progression. We had the songs. You try to put the songs into an overarching context, like an umbrella of what the whole album is going to be like, and you just have to find a progression that just feels natural and pleasant to listen to. You need variation, but you can't have too much variation, or it'll feel like very scattered or something. So I hope we struck a good balance, but I wouldn't say that it was uh, difficult. It was more, yeah, just took a little maybe extra thought and care into, because there are so many things. Hopefully people will listen from start to end on the album. Like sometimes you'll just put on the one song or whatever, but if you listen from the beginning to end, you need to obviously think about key changes or tempo changes and all that kind of stuff. And um, I hope that it feels like a smooth ride, even though the songs are quite different. And I feel like also, for example, we have the first song, Twilight Force, that is a very clear, just
Straight
punch
to
to
the
the
point.
face, straight to the point power metal song, and basically like almost a callback to our origins. So we just figured like, well, let's make a classic power metal track for our first song, because you would think that, oh, let's write a 12/4 song that should be like a 15-minute symphonic epic something. But we went the complete opposite direction and decided, no, let's just do a quote, like a tribute to our past and write a classic power metal song about Twilight Force. Now that we have the lore and the world is established, and we can then write what is the Twilight Force and who are we. And in the same vein, the song ends with, well, actually the opposite vein. It ends with a bombastic orchestral piece, and it ends with also a presentation of what Twilight Force is in the lyrics. So it sort of like ties together that way also, if you think about it, which I have.
Obviously, I mean, these albums don't show up out of thin air. Obviously, there's a lot of effort and work and thought process that goes into it. Twilight Force is one of my favorite songs of the album because of how simple it is and how simple it starts off the record. And before I get deeper into that album structure, let me ask you this: you mentioned that this album perhaps is a little bit more straightforward at times in its processes. When you look back at all the records that you guys have done, was this a demanding album compared to previous records, or have you guys oversimplified some of those processes?
I would say that this is probably technically more demanding, but I wouldn't say that it was harder for us to make. The most difficult album was probably Heroes of Might and Magic at the time, because that required a lot of like just inventing ways to work, and it was a brand new sound for us, and we had a very clear idea of something that we wanted to make, but we hadn't made before. So it was a lot of inventing new tools and techniques to get there, and I feel like we did. But with all that baggage that we have, and all the experience from making those, I would say, 3 very different sounding albums in the past, we could now focus. And but even though the processes are more developed and maybe a little more like advanced, I still feel like we knew what we were doing. So I wouldn't say that, I don't want to be a toot any horns and saying, "Oh, we're masters of our craft." That's not what it is. But we, I feel like we've mastered what we wanted to do for this album, and I'm happy with it, how that turned out. Ask me
And
again in 3 years, and I would probably tell you that, oh, that last album.
but it's always like that. The new album
Yes.
is always the best album. Not necessarily the most favorite album, but definitely the best album. At least every band should thrive to that. I mean, you don't want to make an album worse than the previous one.
Of course, yeah. We're all striving for perfection, so.
Exactly. And you already mentioned the song "Twilight Force," the opening track on the album. I want to get a little bit into the overall design of the record, because I thought it was interesting in so many different ways. Twilight Force, we already talked about the song. I think it's a great opening track. You guys have a great closing track that really gives a sense of finality to the experience of listening to the record from start to end. It really is a closing. Do you know what I mean? In every sense of the word. But they're so different from one another, and I gravitate so much towards Twilight Force because of that more traditional power metal sound that gets you going, and it's so jovial, and you just like happy and go lucky and going with it. Do you have a favorite song on this album, considering how different all of these tracks are?
That's a good question. Yeah, Twilight Force is always, we've always tried to instill, joy and triumph and a sense of adventure. That's why we sort of coined or call ourselves adventure metal, also in addition to power metal. So that I hope that's the feeling that you get. And like you said, the last song is very different. It's a little more gloomy and
More stripped down.
yes, so that gives a very different sense of a different emotion to the ending of the album. But for my own personal favorites, I would say one of my favorites might be Sky Knights of Eldoria, actually. I mean, I like the whole album. Sky Knights I like that because it's so different, because we just happened to realize that blast beats was what brought that song to life, because that wasn't the plan originally. We obviously didn't, let's write a blast beat song. But once we were sitting there, once we were arranging the song, and we were trying out drums, and Diash was doing his thing, he just like out of the blue, just, let's try blast beats, and we did, and that was, the hit the nail on the head right there. So, but once that can of worms was open, there was no no putting the cat back in the bag. So we stuck to the blast beats, and I really like that feeling in that song. It gives me, at least, that adventurous sense of really flying on the back of giant eagles from the the scene from Lord of the Rings, which was what we kind of set out to do with that song. So that has some cool parts that I really enjoy. But I don't know. I feel like all songs have something that they bring to the table, since they're fairly different.
Yeah. The album, I think it's one of the most diverse albums you guys have put together in terms
Okay.
of what you can squeeze out of each and every single track. And when you look at the design, I thought it was interesting that you guys added almost like pieces of interludes into actual tracks. And I that kind of caught me off guard, because I thought in the modern day of how people digest music, through Spotify and streaming services, that prolongs the nature of the song, and it may take away from the playability of the song in that kind of format. Were you guys concerned about that on some of these tracks?
Not really. I don't. I try to not think too much about that. Obviously, you have to think about things when you're releasing singles. For example, you have to be a little more. You want things, songs to catch people's ears and be slightly more maybe easy to digest. Because, like you said, people will just put it on Spotify and listen, and it needs to strike a nerve fairly quickly. But I try to not. We never set out to like let's write a coherent, easy listening power metal. Some songs just turn out a certain way. Some songs turn out another way. So I try to not think too much about that because it's all the whatever music we write is gonna just reflect what we wanted to create at the moment. There is no, I wouldn't say I'm too conscious about that. Maybe we should be more conscious. I don't know, but
I know
I try to
on
just.
one hand, you have songs that, like I said, that include those kind of interlude pieces, those conversational pieces that really help define the story and where you are within the story. So they're extremely helpful for the listener. And then you have a song like A Familiar Memory, which I was like, I have to ask you, what was the thought process of that track? Because you could totally include that track as part of an interlude of the song that follows versus having it as a separate song.
Yeah, well, we wanted. That's funny that you mentioned that song in particular because we've had that idea for a very long time to write to make like an acoustic arrangement off of one of our previous songs. In this case, it was Flight of the Sapphire Dragon. That's why it's called A Familiar Memory. So, if you know that song, you will recognize it. And we made as one of the bonus tracks. We did the longer version that also includes, besides Flight of the Sapphire Dragon, also There and Back Again and Battle of Arcane Might. So that will that just turned out to be, we didn't know how long it was going to be, so we added it as a bonus track instead. And we wanted a reindeer to sing on that track because he has a very lovely, pleasant voice that people might not know. So we figured let's give him some voice time in the spotlight, and it turned out really great. But we figured let's break it down, make a little shorter interlude just to bring it down a little bit, give the listener a little bit of a breather. And I think we managed to put it in a place where it sort of like connects the songs, so it's like a natural progression when you go into, I think it's Sunlight Night after that. So
It is.
yeah, so yeah, we just, yeah, it's just something we wanted to do for a long time, and it just fit very well to make one shorter version and then a bonus track, longer version with a little extended arrangement and different arrangement. So yeah, I'm happy with. I wouldn't mind actually like making a whole album like that. Like you make a cover album of your own songs with acoustic, orchestral, folkish type arrangements. I really love doing that type of thing. So
I think it works
we'll
well
see.
also for the band.
Yeah.
In terms of the world that you guys have created for Twilight Force.
Absolutely, yeah, and it could easily work as a little unplugged tour.
Yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. On all these tracks that you guys worked on for this album, which one for you was perhaps the most challenging one?
Well, two tracks comes to mind. First, I would say The Last Crystal Bear, because it's very heavily orchestrated and there's a lot of parts that needed to fit together and to make the flow and just work through the arrangement. That took a very long time. But that was more so just because it's a long song and very intricate arrangements and it takes time. But the most difficult song in terms of challenges was, I think, believe it or not, Sunlight Night, because we had so many versions of that song. We tried different tempos, different instrumentations, different arrangements, different everything, and it wouldn't, like, never, it just wouldn't, it didn't feel right. So that took a very long time, almost to the point where we said, just, nah, let's just skip this song altogether. It's just throw in the trash. I'm glad we didn't, because once you with enough blood, sweat, and tears, you can make things work. And we spent enough time to actually it found, it found its way home. So now I'm very happy with how it turned out, but it was just a very big challenge. Sometimes it just doesn't, no matter what you do, it just won't. You try everything. It's like different guitar sounds, different styles of playing, different ways of playing, and it just wouldn't. But it turned out great, and eventually, I just don't want to know. I don't want the chess clock to, I don't know how many hours we spent on that, or weeks.
Months. You start with hours, you move to weeks, and
yeah, yes. I try to not think about it.
I don't know if the label has sent you the vinyl of the record or not, but maybe a month down the road, when you when you're on tour and you pick up that vinyl at the merch stand, what is the first word that's going to come to your mind when you look at that cover?
We actually did an unboxing just the other day, so we will post a little clip of that. So I have seen it in person, and it looks brilliant. It is the artwork is very glorious. I'm very happy with how it turned out, actually. So and I think it is the first time in Twilight Force history where the album cover is directly depicting the title of the album and one of the songs in the album. So that's a first, and a tradition we should keep going.
I think you need to keep that tradition.
Yes. So no, it looks really cool, actually. I actually have not opened. I haven't opened the vinyl, so I don't know what it looks like inside yet. I've just seen the wrapped version, but I just haven't had time to sit down and do that.
Cool, nevertheless. Cool, nevertheless.
Yes, very cool. Yeah.
One last question for you, and that is, with the album coming out January 20th on Nuclear Blast, where can fans see, either where or when can fans see Twilight Force in 2023?
Well, we have the tour that we are going. It's a week from today, ish. We are on the 20th, the same day as the release of the album, is the first day of our tour, the Winter Wonder Tour. So that's our first headline tour, which will be a lot of fun and excitement. But so that goes on for about 3 weeks, and then we have also going to Japan this spring. And then I'm not entirely sure what summer festivals have been officially announced yet, so I can't really give you a rundown. But there are a bunch of festivals this summer, so that's exciting. I feel very happy that we can go back to some sort of normalcy and make up for a little lost time.
Yeah, and I've seen you guys post about a lot of these tour dates, and not just headlining tour, but even some support tours as well. Are you guys planning on? And this is part B of my last question. When we'll see Twilight Force in North America, in the U.S. and Canada? Do you guys are planning anything?
There's we talk about it all the time, and we feel like we obviously want to. It's just touring in the US is difficult. It's a costly endeavor, unfortunately. So it is those you have the classical prog power and 70K that all the European bands seem to end up on. But so that's always a lot of fun. Obviously we're not on 70K this year. We'll see whatever happens with the other things. I would really love to go, obviously, as soon as possible. There has been talks for sure about it, but there is nothing set in stone yet. I know there are a lot of people asking for it, and so there is obviously a support, and then people want to see us there. So we really want to come and bring some magic.
Exactly. Bring some dragons and some magic into the lands of this continent of ours.
Yes. the land of the freedom, land of freedom.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
land of
we'll
the
need
free,
to.
home of the brave. I don't know,
Yes.
Canada is the land of the hockey and the maple syrup.
Oh yeah. There you
It's
go.
all good. It's all
Yeah,
good.
no. Soon enough, we will definitely cut there. It's basically a matter of time and what the what is written in the book of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The borders and all of that shit. All right, man. Blackwall, thank you very much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure to talk about Twilight Force, to talk about your music, the things that you're up to. It's been a very long time. I don't think we had talked about for maybe a year or two. I mean, it feels probably like two. Maybe
Yes.
I'm overextending myself, but maybe two. So it's always a pleasure talking to you. It's always a pleasure having you on the channel. Thank you very much for your time.
Super nice. Thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it. All
No
right.
problem,
So
man. All the best.
you too. Have a great night.
You too.
Cheers.